Hey everybody, it's Sensei Sid with Fields Karate. Today I want to talk a little bit more about karate culture and what it is and how it works. And one of the big parts behind karate culture and culture within our little microculture of Fields Karate is the bow. And this is something that I get a lot of questions about, and that's good, it's okay, because bowing is a very Asian concept. So when you go to some place like Europe or the Americas, bowing isn't really typically part of the culture in a normal kind of a way. So it's understandable why so many of us don't understand why in a karate school, and especially a traditional karate school, why we bow and why we bow so much. So there are a couple of things that you need to know about bowing in a karate class or a karate school. First, it's why. Why do we bow? And you have to understand that bowing in Japanese and Okinawan culture is simply a sign of respect. It's very similar to in the military, one person saluting another, a subordinate saluting a superior. Only in Japanese and Okinawan cultures, it's not just the subordinates who bow to superiors, but peers will often bow to each other. Superiors will also bow, slightly different manner, but will still bow also to subordinates because it's a sign of common respect, common courtesy. It's often used for greetings and that sort of thing. So much like when we do a firm handshake in America, that's a respectful greeting. A bow would be much the same thing if you were to have the same scenario but in Japan. You would not reach out and shake a hand necessarily, but you would bow instead. Now, a very important thing to understand about bowing is it's a sign of respect, and that's all it is. In our karate classes, you will often hear me call rei. And rei in Japanese simply means respect. And bowing is how we show respect. Rei does not mean to bow. Rei means respect. And we show that respect by bowing. So you need to understand that very nuanced difference between what rei or respect is and how you show respect. But that's all it is. It means to show respect. A lot of people, especially in American culture, associate bowing with worship. And while bowing can be associated with worship, it isn't always. You see, you can respect someone without worshiping them. But you cannot worship someone without respecting them. That's a one-way street. If you're going to worship someone or something, you have to respect them. But you can show respect without necessarily worshiping. And in Japanese culture, that's what it is. If in Japan you are going to show respect to someone or something that you worship, you would bow. But you would also bow to someone that you simply respect, but not necessarily worship. You understand the difference? It's a very, very important one. And it's very, very much outside of our traditional, especially the Judeo-Christian perspective that is very common in America and much of Europe. Bowing does not equal worship in every scenario. So it's important to understand what bowing in a Japanese or an Okinawan context is. It's simply respect. Now, it's also important to do it properly. If you do what we might call a sloppy bow, you're showing respect without really showing respect. You might be outwardly showing respect, but without a genuine respect behind it. It's very much like when a child, when you tell a child to do something, yes sir, okay? They're being compliant, but they're not really showing the respect, even though they're using the right words. They're not honestly respectful of it. So a proper bow is fairly important. So when you bow, you want to bring your hands to your side and you want to bend at the waist and keep your back straight. Now, and depending on where you are, sometimes you also dip your head, sometimes you keep your eyes up. that really is different from one area and from one school to another. And it comes down to a matter of trust. If you are showing mutual respect to someone that you trust, you may be okay to dip your eyes. If you are showing mutual respect to someone that you don't trust, you would be wise to keep your eyes up and on them. This was both were a very common way of bowing in Japan. Now, the more important part of that, though, is making sure that you bow at the waist instead of hunching over it in the middle of your back or slumping your shoulders. This is not a bow. Okay? This is the kid going, yes, sir. Okay? To show a proper bow, feet together. In some schools, the toes are slightly apart, like a 45-degree angle. Either way is okay. Hands by your side, bow at the waist, come right back up. And in the context of a karate class, you always go back to hachi-dachi, or your ready stance, from there. In casual conversation, and if you just go to Japan or to Okinawa and you meet someone and you want to show respect, you don't start off in hachi-dachi, and it's not that structured and rigid in everyday culture. But in the context of a class, a very formal setting, it often is much more rigid. So speak with your own instructor about that. In our class, it's supposed to be fairly rigid the whole way through. And being mindful to pay attention to the details of how you bow, those details are a show of respect. And that's one of the big reasons why bowing properly is so very important. Now, there's also a question of, in the context of a karate school, when do you bow? Now, these rules are pretty common to most karate schools, though every school can be a little bit different of when they expect you to bow. But here at Fields Karate and in many schools, when you step onto the training floor, you're expected to bow to the space. It's not because there's anything sacred or holy about the dojo and about the training floor, but we respect the space much like we respect people, because if you cannot respect things and places, you cannot respect people. So we bow as we enter the training area. Now here, we do not bow simply because we walk in the door. We have an area that's just kind of a public area for spectators to sit and watch. Bowing into that area is not necessary, but in some schools, even just walking through the door, you would be expected to bow. Check with your own instructor on that one. But when you step onto the training floor, you're expected to bow. Or when you step off the training floor, you're expected to bow. We begin and end every class with a bow. We will bow then at the beginning and at the end. We will bow anytime we partner off with someone. When we're training with a partner, at the beginning of that little training session, we bow and show respect to our partner. And at the end of it, we bow and show respect as if we're saying thank you. And then also at the beginning and the end of every kata that we practice, we begin with a bow and we end with a bow. Now, you'll notice a kind of a parallelism here. We bow coming onto the floor and leaving the floor, at the beginning and at the end. We bow at the beginning of a class and at the end of a class. We bow at the beginning of a training session with a partner and at the end of a training session with a partner. And we bow at the beginning of a kata and at the end of a kata. There's a parallelism there for a reason. Master Funakoshi made it very clear and said it outright, that karate begins and ends with respect, with rei. And so, to reinforce that idea, we bow at the beginning and at the end of almost everything, as we step in and as we step out. And that's to demonstrate that idea of showing respect all throughout our training process. And this is one of those things that really should carry over. We should be respectful start to finish as we train karate. But we should also be respectful from start to finish as we do our schoolwork. We should be respectful start to finish as we go to our day jobs. We should be respectful start to finish as we go to church. Start to finish, respect should be a common characteristic, beginning and end, everywhere in between. Respect for a karate student, being respectful, not receiving respect necessarily, but being respectful, is something that should characterize us. It's something that we should be known by. And that is one of the ideas behind seeking perfection of character. We have a creed that starts with that. Seek perfection of character. That's the overarching goal of karate here, of the way we train. But one of the other phrases is respect others. Respecting others is part of seeking the perfection of character. And so respecting others should be a common and ingrained characteristic of a karate student, of a karateka. And that doesn't change from any one rank to another, whether you're white belt, green belt, black belt, doesn't matter. Showing respect is something that's always expected of you. So that's a little bit of a background on bowing in the context of karate culture, what it means, how to do it, and why it's important. Now, do I expect my karate students to go to school and bow when they walk in the door? No. Do I expect them to bow to their pastor or their priest when they walk into church? No. But this should carry over to other areas of life. Do I expect them to be respectful to their teachers? Yes. Do I expect them to be respectful to their parents at home? Absolutely. Do I expect them to be respectful to their pastors and priests? Certainly, I do. And that's something that we talk about a lot. But that's how your karate training, beyond just the self-defense aspect, can actually affect and influence and change the way you live day to day. It changes your character. Karate is not just about fighting. Karate is about character. And this is one of the ways that we show it, demonstrate it, and reinforce it all the way through. That's the point of bowing in a karate school. Thanks for watching.